So, what happens when we die? It's a huge question, right? And for centuries, Christianity has had a pretty intense answer: hell. That one word has shaped art, literature, you name it. So, in this explainer, we're going to dig into that. We're going to look at what different Christian traditions actually believe about who goes to hell and why.
And really, this is one of the biggest, toughest questions out there. Who gets saved and who gets damned? It's not just some abstract theological puzzle, you know? It really gets to the core of what we think about justice, about mercy, heck, about the entire point of our lives. And let me tell you, the answers, they are not straightforward.
Because there is no one answer. The beliefs are all over the map, changing dramatically from one denomination to the next. So let's break it down. We're going to walk through the major views on the afterlife, from the traditional ideas of eternal punishment to some really interesting alternatives that, well, they might just surprise you. All right, so let's start with the one most of us probably think of first, the traditional view, hell as an everlasting punishment. Yeah, this is the version that has fueled countless nightmares and sermons for centuries.
Okay, first up, the Roman Catholic Church. Their perspective is really specific. You could almost say it's kind of legalistic in how it defines what gets someone sent to hell.
And it all hinges on this one key idea: mortal sin. Now, this is not just any little slip-up. We're talking about three specific things. 1, it has to be a grave violation. 2, you have to have full knowledge that it's wrong. And 3, you have to deliberately consent to it. And here's the kicker: you have to die without ever repenting for it. Now, this part is absolutely crucial to understanding the Catholic view. God doesn't send people to hell. They believe you choose it. Think about it like this. God's holding the door to paradise wide open, but a person makes a free choice to turn their back and walk away, forever. Hell, in this view, isn't a punishment from God. It's the final logical outcome of self-exclusion. It's a definitive no to God's yes. Okay, so that's the Catholic view, which is all about a final free choice. But now, let's pivot to the Eastern Orthodox Church, because their take on what hell even is completely different. Honestly, it's kind of a mind-bender. Get this, for the Orthodox, heaven and hell aren't different places. They're the same place. Seriously. Both are about being in the direct, unfiltered, all-consuming presence of God. The only thing that's different is how you experience that presence. So, how does that work? Well, it all comes down to the state of your soul when you die. The Orthodox have this concept called theosis, which is this lifelong journey of becoming more like God. If you've spent your life opening your heart, then God's presence feels like blissful, warm light. But if your heart is hardened and shut, that exact same love is experienced as a painful, tormenting fire. It's the same reality, just a totally different perception. So we've got a view based on law and choice, and another based on spiritual experience. Now let's dive into the huge world of Protestantism. And even though it's super diverse, a lot of the major denominations actually share a pretty similar core belief about what leads to hell. For many, many Protestants, we're talking Anglicans, Lutherans, Baptists, Pentecostals, the list goes on. The bottom line is this: it's all about your response to the gospel. The one thing that leads to damnation is a final, total rejection of Jesus Christ. It's choosing, in the end, to be separated from God for good. But hold on, because right here is where things get really, really interesting inside Protestantism. Okay, so you have to accept or reject the gospel. But how does that happen? That one question starts one of the biggest debates in Christian history: predestination versus free will. So you've got two major camps. On one side, you have the Reformed or Calvinist view. They believe God is totally sovereign, and he decided before time even began who would be saved. It's called election. Then, on the other side, you have the Arminian view. Think Methodists, for example. They believe God's grace makes it possible for every single person to freely choose salvation. One is a divine decree, the other is a divine partnership. And as you can imagine, that creates two totally different paths to heaven or hell. Okay, so up to this point, every single view we've talked about has one thing in common: hell is forever. But what if it's not? Not all Christians agree on that. So let's look at two major alternative views that completely challenge that idea. First, there's a belief called annihilationism. It's held by groups like the Seventh-day Adventists, and the name kind of gives it away. The idea here isn't that the unsaved are tormented forever, it's that they simply cease to exist. They're annihilated. This whole idea rests on something called conditional immortality. It says that humans don't automatically have immortal souls. No, immortality is a gift from God, and it's only given to those who are saved. So if you're not saved, you don't suffer forever. Your existence just ends. The eternal punishment isn't the suffering, it's the permanent destruction. All right, and from there we go to probably the most hopeful, optimistic view of them all, Christian universalism. This is the belief that in the end, everyone gets saved. No exceptions. It's definitely a minority view for sure, but it has a surprisingly long history in Christian thought. So for a universalist, hell isn't about punishment. It's about purification. It's temporary. Think of it less like a prison and more like a cosmic refinery or a spiritual hospital, where everything that's wrong gets burned away and healed. The core belief here is that God's love and Christ's sacrifice are just too powerful to fail. In the end, everyone, and they mean everyone, is brought back to God.
Wow. Okay, so we have covered a ton of ground here, right? From eternal torment all the way to everyone being saved. So now let's pull back and put it all together to see the whole big picture.
Because when you lay all these beliefs out next to each other, you really start to see just how deep the disagreements run on some of the biggest questions there are: God's justice, our freedom, and where we're all headed in the end.
Okay, let's just walk through this for a second. Look at the primary criteria column. For Catholics, it's dying with unrepented mortal sin. For a Calvinist, it's simply not being one of God's chosen elect. That is a massive difference. And then you go over to nature and duration. You've got everything from eternal, conscious suffering, to just poofing out of existence, to a temporary state that actually fixes you. It's an incredible spectrum of belief, all under the same umbrella of Christianity.
So where does this leave us? I mean, the fact that one single faith tradition can have such wildly different answers to the ultimate question is pretty staggering. It tells you a lot about the human struggle to make sense of the biggest mysteries. And it leaves us with a question to ponder, right? What do you think? What does justice look like in the end? What does mercy look like? And ultimately, what kind of story do we believe we're in?